They kicked me out, with just $5, and a bag hope you rot on the street, now they're begging me to come back. I walked out of my son's house, hearing the door click shut behind me, and the still echoing laughter in the hallway. My son Jason slid a crumpled $5 bill into the pocket of my fading jacket and said in a voice colder than the Ohio winter, "Here's $5. Use it to find a grave with a view." The sound of the door closing behind me was light, deliberate, final. Not a slam, just the soft click of dismissal, as if he had taken out the trash. Lauren stood behind him, arms folded, eyes fixed on the floor. I waited for a word, a breath of guilt. There was nothing. The air was cold, and I could hear my own breath louder than their silence. I looked down at the crumpled bill in my hand. $5. That was what 37 years of motherhood and sacrifice were worth. I could still feel the warmth of his fingers pressing it into my coat pocket, like a brand. The world didn't tilt or shatter, it just shrank. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I walked away with a small canvas bag over my shoulder. Inside were 3 worn dresses, my last medical results, and a pair of glasses with one loose arm. That was all I had left from a lifetime of giving. Every step down that driveway felt like a page being torn out of my life. I didn't cry, not because I was strong, but because I was hollow. A year before, I sold my small house, the only thing my late husband and I ever owned, to save Jason's company after the pandemic. The bank had refused to lend him another cent. He came to me, shaking, saying, "Mom, I'll lose everything." I didn't hesitate. I handed him the check from the sale of my home and said, "Then don't." I didn't ask for papers or promises. I trusted my son. He said it would be temporary, that he'd build it back and buy me a little apartment when things turned around. But once the company started to recover, Lauren's tone changed. She began to speak of me as if I were an old debt that refused to die. She said, "Your mother's holding us back, Jason. You'll never have peace while she's hanging around here." Lauren never forgave me for something I didn't even do. She believed I'd helped Jason leave his first wife, a woman she said he truly loved. That marriage had been drowning long before I said a word, but in Lauren's eyes, I was the witch who broke it apart. The day she moved into my home, she called it her space, not ours. She changed the locks on the study where my husband's books were still lined up, saying, "It's better this way. The past only clutters things." I started feeling invisible in my own home. My coffee cup disappeared from the cabinet. My seat at the table became extra. When guests came, Lauren introduced me as Jason's mom. "She's staying with us for now." Staying. As though I had just dropped by and overstayed my welcome. One night, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. Lauren's voice was sharp, soaked in irritation. "She's just a warm body with a name on a will. We just need to keep her breathing until the paperwork clears." And Jason, my son, the same boy who used to beg me for one more bedtime story, laughed and said, "She's one flu away from solving all our problems." That was the night I packed my things. I didn't say goodbye. I couldn't. When morning came, they were waiting for me by the door, Lauren holding it open with that smirk she saved for people she thought beneath her. Jason gave me the $5. That was their version of closure. I stood there, staring at the house I'd paid for, the life I'd built. Every window glared back at me like an accusation. I wanted to ask him if he remembered who bought his first car, who paid for his braces, who worked double shifts when his father got sick. But the words wouldn't come. Pride, grief, and disbelief tangled in my throat. So I walked. The driveway felt longer than it ever had before. The mailbox with my last name looked foreign. The pavement was uneven, and the sun was merciless, as if mocking my foolishness. With each step, the weight of the bag grew heavier, not because of what was inside, but because of everything that wasn't. By the time I reached the end of the street, the only thing left of my life behind me was the echo of a soft closing door and a $5 bill burning in my pocket like proof that love could, indeed, run out. I arrived at Isabella's house, carrying the same canvas bag that had followed me since that morning, the one that still smelled faintly of my old home. Isabella had been my friend for 40 years, back when our husbands worked together and our children still played in the same yard. She had always been the sensible one, the kind of woman who read fine print and never trusted a smile. I used to tease her for it. That afternoon, when I showed up on her porch, half frozen and holding that bag like it contained my last heartbeat, she didn't ask questions. She simply opened the door and said, "Come in, Edna. Sit down before the wind cuts you in half." Her house smelled like lemon polish and quiet. The world outside felt loud and cruel. Inside, it was all stillness and sympathy. I told her what happened, not in detail, because the words hurt to form. She listened without interrupting, her face changing from pity to something harder, like stone. When I finished, she stood up and said, "Let me check something." She disappeared into her small office. The one her husband used to joke was her courtroom, and the sound of keys tapping on a laptop broke the silence. I waited, clutching my coat like it could protect me from what was coming. When she came back, her face had drained of color. She held the laptop out to me, and her voice was trembling. "Edna, according to the state of Ohio, you don't exist anymore. You died 2 months ago." The room tilted. I thought I misheard her. "What did you say?" She turned the screen toward me. There it was, my name, my birth date, my social security number, and beneath it, deceased. Certificate issued, August 4th. I felt my lungs seize. I couldn't even cry. I stared at the word like it was a lie the world had agreed upon. I whispered, "They really did it." Isabella looked at me. "Who did what?" "If I'm alive, they can't get the insurance money." My voice came out flat. "They killed me on paper, Bella, Jason, and Lauren." Isabella sank into the chair opposite me, her hands covering her mouth. "Jesus, Edna." I reached into my bag and took out the $5 bill, the same one Jason had shoved into my coat. I laid it on her table. "That's all I have left, $5 and a heart that doesn't know how to stop beating." She looked at me for a long time, eyes glassy but fierce. Then she said quietly, "Then let's make that $5 count for something. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening." She made tea while I sat there numb. The steam fogged my glasses, and for a strange moment I thought maybe this was all a misunderstanding, a clerical error, some bureaucratic nightmare that could be fixed with a phone call. But Isabella's face told me otherwise. She had seen too many cases, too many signatures forged by people who swore to love one another. We spent the next hour going through what I still had: letters, my expired driver's license, a few old tax documents. Everything pointed to one truth. On paper, Edna Marie no longer existed. There would be no pension, no health insurance, no access to the bank account I had shared with my late husband. Even my own doctor wouldn't see me if I tried to make an appointment, because the system now recognized me as dead. "Do you understand what this means?" Isabella said. "They've stolen your identity, your rights, your very existence, and they'll get away with it unless we act fast." I nodded, still stunned. "I'm already dead to them, Bella. They just made it official." She leaned forward. "You can't give up. We're going to get proof. You may be dead on paper, but you're still breathing in my living room." That night, she gave me a small room at the back of her house. It used to belong to her daughter, long gone to California. There was a single bed, a lamp, and a window that faced the alley. I sat on that bed staring at my hands for a long time, tracing the lines on my palms like they could tell me who I was. I thought of Jason as a boy, how he used to draw his hand over mine and laugh about how small his fingers were compared to mine. I wondered when he stopped seeing me as a mother and started seeing me as an obstacle. Maybe it happened the day money became his god. Or maybe it started long before, when he realized love was the one currency I never made him pay for. In the middle of the night, I heard Isabella on the phone in the other room, speaking in her sharp lawyer tone, the voice that used to make grown men nervous. She was asking for access to legal archives, mentioning fraud and identity theft. I wanted to tell her to stop, that it wasn't worth it, that I didn't want her dragged into my mess. But I stayed quiet. For the first time in years, someone was fighting for me, and I couldn't bear to stop it. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the death certificate with my name on it. I imagined Lauren signing the forms, her manicured fingers holding the pen steady while Jason stood beside her, arms crossed. Maybe he hesitated, maybe he didn't. Either way, they'd buried me without a coffin. When morning came, Isabella knocked on my door holding a mug of coffee. "Eat something," she said. "We have a lot to do." I took the cup, my hands trembling slightly. "What happens next?" She smiled, the kind of smile that means war. "Next," she said, "we make the living rise from the dead." The morning I decided to stop being dead, the sky over Ohio was pale and dry. Isabella had spent the night drafting letters to every authority she knew, and by dawn she was snoring softly on the couch with her glasses still on. I watched her sleep for a while. There was something oddly comforting about the quiet determination in that woman. She was my last ally, but I knew that what had been stolen from me could not be returned in silence. By 8, I was walking toward the old house on Maple Street, the one I used to call home. I carried nothing but my bag, a hammer, a roll of red fabric, and a paintbrush I borrowed from Isabella's shed. When I reached the gate, I saw the garden I'd once tended, now trimmed into sterile perfection. Not a single wildflower remained. Lauren's taste was always clean, sharp, and lifeless. The mailbox still said Jason and Lauren Carter. My name had been scrubbed away. I hammered 2 nails into the fence post and unrolled the banner. The letters were uneven, my hands shaking as I painted them in thick black strokes. "My name is EDNA. They said I'm dead, but I'm still alive, and I'm here to take my name back." When I hung it, the wind caught the fabric, snapping it loud enough to turn a few heads down the street. A man mowing his lawn stopped. A woman walking her dog took out her phone. Within minutes, someone called the news. I didn't plan it to go viral. I only wanted to be seen to prove that I existed. 15 minutes later, the front door opened. Lauren's voice sliced through the air. "What the hell are you doing, Edna?" I didn't answer. Jason appeared behind her, his hair perfect, his expression flat. He looked at me like a stranger loitering outside his property. "You need to leave before I call the police," he said. I turned to him. "They won't arrest a dead woman." Lauren hissed. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said quietly. "I'm reminding you that I'm still here." A car stopped nearby. A reporter and a cameraman got out. The woman approached with cautious curiosity. "Ma'am, are you the one who put up this banner?" "Yes," I said. "I'm the woman who died 2 months ago, according to her own son." Lauren's face drained of color. Jason started to speak, but the reporter was faster. "Would you like to explain, sir? Your mother says she's been declared deceased." He stammered. "That's absurd." "She's confused." "Confused?" I took the $5 bill from my pocket, held it up to the camera. This is what he gave me before he shut that door in my face. $5. That's how much my life was worth to him. The cameraman zoomed in on my hand. The bill looked small and tired between my fingers. I said, "I keep it because it reminds me that I'm still alive and because even the dead deserve proof of what was taken from them." The reporter looked stunned. A few neighbors had come out now, whispering, filming on their phones. The air was thick with curiosity, and under it, his shame. Lauren muttered something to Jason, and they both retreated inside, slamming the door. But it was too late. The world outside had already begun to watch. Within hours, the footage was everywhere. Headlines appeared, "Ohio woman declared dead stands, outside son's home claiming fraud." I didn't read the comments, but Isabella did. She said people were furious, some wanted to help, some just wanted the spectacle. I didn't care about either. I only cared that my name was being spoken again. That evening, a young journalist called Isabella's landline. She wanted to interview me for a follow-up segment. Isabella asked if I was sure, and I said yes. I didn't want pity, I wanted witnesses. The next day, we sat outside the same fence, under that same banner, now rippling like a flag. The reporter asked softly, "Why are you doing this, Edna?" I said, "Because when they erased my name, they didn't just steal money. They stole proof that I ever mattered, and I won't die quietly twice. She asked about the $5 again, and I lifted it, smoothing the creases against my knee. This, I said, is the price my son put on me. But I kept it to remember that I still have value, even when others forget. By the time she packed up her camera, the sun had dropped low, throwing long shadows across the yard. I stood there for a while, watching the lights flick on inside the house that used to be mine. Behind those curtains, Jason and Lauren were probably panicking, whispering about damage control. They didn't understand that what they feared most had already happened. I was no longer silent. If you're listening to this, remember this part. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. 2 days later, the insurance company called Isabella. The investigation into my death was reopened. A representative visited her office, asking for documentation, timelines, proof of life. Proof of life, that phrase made me laugh when she told me. All I had to do to prove I was alive was breathe, but for the system, I needed paper, witnesses, evidence. By the end of the week, the state attorney's office had received a report. The fraudulent certificate, the suspicious policy, the matching signatures. Someone had to sign off on my death, and soon we'd find out who. The night before the news broke, Isabella sat with me on her porch. She poured 2 cups of tea and said, "You realize they'll come after you now, right?" I smiled faintly. They already did. They just didn't finish the job. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint scent of the flowers Lauren had once replaced with gravel. I watched the banner from across the street, fluttering in the dark like a warning, like a heartbeat. For the first time in months, I slept without fear. Because even the dead, once they start speaking, are impossible to silence. The banner did what I never could. It made them careless. Lauren, in her fury, called the insurance company to clarify her side, and that call was recorded. Isabella got a copy through a friend still working in the state office. In that call, Lauren slipped. She mentioned the policy, the release date, and the death certificate that already cleared. That was the first thread. Isabella pulled until the whole tapestry came apart. She spent days on the phone, cross-checking every document tied to my name. One night, I woke up to find her sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of printed files. Her glasses were sliding down her nose, and her laptop glowed blue in the dark. "Edna," she said without looking up, "I think I've found how they did it." The death certificate had been issued by Dr. Alan Pierce, a man who had once borrowed money from me when his clinic nearly went under. I remembered giving him a check for $3,000 and a promise. "You'll pay me back when you can." He never did. Now he'd paid me back in full by signing my death. Isabella explained it carefully, like she didn't want to break me. The certificate skipped every required step. No medical record, no coroner confirmation, just a signature and a date. The insurance claim that followed listed Lauren Carter as the primary beneficiary of a $500,000 life insurance policy taken out 3 months before my death. My signature was at the bottom, shaky but convincing. I stared at it for a long time. "That's not my hand." "I know," Isabella said. "They traced it from your old tax forms. But it's enough to pass casual review." The idea that they hadn't just erased me, but planned it, filled me with a cold that no blanket could fight. They had thought it through every paper, every loophole. It wasn't a mistake. It was a slow, deliberate burial. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. Isabella pushed a stack of forms toward me. "I've filed preliminary complaints with the Insurance Fraud Bureau and the state attorney. Tomorrow morning, we deliver the originals." I touched the forged signature again. "They thought I'd never see this." "They thought you'd never breathe again," she said. We drove to the courthouse early, before the heat set in. Isabella had packed the files into a leather folder. I sat beside her in silence, the $5 bill folded neatly inside my palm. When we walked through security, The guard looked at me twice. "You look familiar," he said. Isabella smiled and replied, "She should. She's back from the dead." In the office of the state attorney, a young clerk took our statement. Isabella spoke first, calm and clear. She explained how my son and daughter-in-law had declared me deceased, how a compromised doctor had signed off, and how the policy money had been waiting in escrow. The clerk's eyes widened with each word. When he asked for identification, Isabella handed over the printed death certificate. "Here's her ID," she said. "Apparently, she's dead. But as you can see, she's sitting right here." He looked at me, speechless. I smiled politely. I make a poor corpse. The meeting lasted hours. By the end, the attorney himself came in to shake my hand and said, "Mrs. Carter, this case is going to shake some people. Are you ready for that?" I said, "I was raised in Ohio winters. I can handle a little shaking." That night, back at Isabella's, the relief hit us both. She poured 2 glasses of wine, cheap but celebratory, and we sat on the porch, watching the sun fade behind the rooftops. "You know," she said, "this could go national. Once the fraud team moves, Jason and Lauren will be in headlines before week's end." I didn't smile. "It's not the fame I want, Bella. I just want my name to mean something again." She nodded. "It will. They killed you on paper, Edna. Now you're going to live again through truth." We toasted to that, 2 women on a porch, holding the night like armor. Somewhere inside the house, the phone rang. Isabella answered, listened, then covered the receiver. "That was the investigator," she said. "They're issuing subpoenas. Tomorrow." The word settled in my chest, like the first clean breath after drowning. Tomorrow, the day my killers would finally feel the living weight of the woman they'd tried to erase. It was nearly midnight when the noise began. A thud, first dull, rhythmic, then a metallic scrape, like someone testing the lock. My small room behind Isabella's house had 1 window and 1 door, both old, both easy to break. I sat up in bed, the air suddenly too thin to breathe. For a moment, I thought it might be the wind. Then I heard the whisper of shoes against gravel. The doorknob rattled, slow and deliberate. My heart began to drum in my ears. I reached for my phone, but my fingers wouldn't work fast enough. The knob twisted again, harder this time. Then came the bang. Whoever it was, they weren't trying to be quiet anymore. "Isabella!" I tried to shout, but my voice cracked. Another bang, this one loud enough to make the hinges shudder. My legs moved before my mind caught up. I grabbed the lamp from the nightstand and stood by the window, ready to swing it if I had to. The door gave 1 final hit before footsteps retreated down the path, fast, uneven, panicked. A minute later, I heard Isabella's voice from the hallway, calling my name. When she opened the door, I was still holding the lamp like a weapon. "Someone was here," I said, my voice shaking. She ran outside while I stood frozen. I could hear her shouting to a neighbor across the alley. The man next door came out with his phone, filming the figure disappearing into the darkness. That video hit the local news before morning. The headline read, "Attempted break-in at home of dead woman in insurance scandal." The footage was grainy, but the shape was unmistakably male, tall, heavy-set, wearing gloves. Isabella turned off the television when she saw it. "They're desperate," she said. "Desperate people make stupid choices." The police came that afternoon. They dusted the door for prints, took photos, asked questions. One of them, a younger officer, found the half-full glass of water on my nightstand. "You drink from this last night?" he asked. I nodded. He sniffed it, frowned, then slipped it into an evidence bag. Hours later, they called back. Traces of benzodiazepine, a sedative, the kind that makes you sleep so deeply you never hear the next sound. I don't remember collapsing, but Isabella told me later that I went pale and fell against the wall. The next thing I knew, I was in a hospital bed, machines humming quietly beside me. The doctor said I'd been given a small dose enough to disorient, not to kill. I suppose that was supposed to comfort me. It didn't. When I woke again, there was a camera crew outside the hospital doors. Reporters wanted to know if I thought Jason and Lauren had sent someone. I didn't answer. I just asked for my $5 back from Isabella's purse. I needed to feel it in my hand. If you feel justice deserves celebration, Smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. 2 detectives visited that evening. One of them, a woman named Ramirez, took out her notepad. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "we've confirmed that the glass in your room contained traces of the same sedative prescribed to your daughter-in-law. Did you know that?" My lips went dry. "She used to keep them in her bathroom cabinet," I said quietly. "For anxiety," she claimed. Ramirez nodded. "We'll need to bring her in for questioning." The other detective, older and skeptical, asked, "Do you really think your son would go this far, ma'am?" I turned my head toward the window, where the night outside looked endless and black. "You tell me, detective, how far would you go to protect $500,000? The next morning, my story was everywhere again, only now, it wasn't about fraud. It was about attempted murder. Woman declared dead, nearly killed in real life. That was the headline. For once, people didn't laugh or doubt. They rallied. Strangers sent letters, prayers, even money I didn't want. The hospital staff treated me like some kind of ghost who refused to leave. When Isabella came to visit, she was furious not at the press, but at herself. "I should have put better locks," she said. "I should have stayed up." "It's not your fault," I told her. "They've already buried their conscience. Locks can't stop that." She sat down beside the bed and took my hand. "You know what this means, right? They're scared. That's why they're acting out. And scared people make mistakes." I looked at the ceiling, at the sterile lights above me. "They already made the mistake," I said. "They thought killing me once was enough." For a long while, neither of us spoke. The heart monitor beeped steadily beside me, a reminder that no matter what they'd done on paper or what they'd tried to do in the dark, I was still here breathing, watching, waiting. The next day, Detective Ramirez called Isabella. "We've opened a full investigation," she said. "We have reason to believe the same doctor who signed the false death certificate also prescribed the sedatives under Lauren's name." Isabella looked at me after hanging up. "They're done, Edna," she whispered. "They just don't know it yet." I leaned back against the pillow, closing my eyes for a moment. The IV line tugged at my skin, but I barely felt it. The cold outside had crept into my bones, but it didn't scare me anymore. Because I finally understood something I hadn't before: death wasn't the worst thing they could give me. Silence was, and I had already broken that. When the nurses came in to check on me later, I asked them to open the window a little. The night air slipped in, sharp and clean. Somewhere in the hallway, the TV played the evening news. They were showing the video of the man running from my door again, the words flashing beneath. "Authorities suspect link to insurance fraud case." I smiled faintly. Justice wasn't quick, but it was moving, and this time it was on my side. The courthouse was colder than any grave. The marble floors echoed with the sound of shoes and whispers, each step a reminder that I was supposed to be underground. Isabella walked beside me, her briefcase clutched tight, her lips set in that line that meant she wouldn't rest until the truth was nailed to the wall. Cameras flashed outside as we entered, reporters shouting, microphones lunging forward, flashes like lightning in a storm. Inside, it smelled like paper, coffee, and nerves. The hearing room was small, but packed lawyers, journalists, a few curious citizens who wanted to see the woman who'd come back from the dead. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands folded neatly, that $5 bill pressed between my palms. Across the aisle sat Jason and Lauren. He looked smaller than I remembered, deflated, like a man who finally realized money couldn't buy silence. She, on the other hand, still held her chin high, like defiance could disguise rot. When the judge entered, everyone stood. He was an older man, gray-haired, eyes sharp behind his glasses. I'd seen him before, years ago, at a community fundraiser. Back then, he'd shaken my hand and told me my son was a fine young man. Life has a dark sense of humor. Isabella opened with precision, her voice calm and cutting. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Edna Marie Carter, stands before this court as proof that truth can't be buried by ink and greed." She laid out the documents one by one. The fraudulent death certificate, the forged insurance policy, the transfer of assets. Each paper hit the table with the quiet authority of a hammer. They didn't just steal her money, Isabella continued. They stole her existence. Lauren's attorney tried to object, claiming there was misunderstanding and mental confusion. Isabella cut through it. Confusion doesn't forge signatures. Confusion doesn't sedate an elderly woman in her own room. Confusion doesn't cash $500,000. The judge raised an eyebrow. You have evidence of that? She nodded and turned to the monitor. The lights dimmed. The first video played, Lauren's own live stream, the one she thought had been deleted. In it, she sneered into her phone, her voice dripping with disdain. The old witch doesn't even know what's coming. I'm tired of pretending she's still useful. She's already half dead, just waiting for paperwork. The courtroom went silent, except for the faint hum of the speakers. Lauren's hands trembled. Then came the second clip, caught from a security camera near Isabella's house, the figure running from my door, the evidence of attempted break-in. Isabella narrated. This occurred days before Mrs. Carter was hospitalized for sedative exposure. The prescription traced to Mrs. Lauren Carter. The judge leaned forward. You're telling me the defendant attempted to murder her mother-in-law after already filing a fraudulent death certificate? Not attempted, Your Honor, Isabella replied. She simply failed. The murmurs rippled through the room. I could feel every heartbeat in my chest, but I stayed still. My eyes found Jason's. He didn't look at me, only at the floor, his jaw tight. He'd aged 10 years since the last time I saw him. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. The judge gestured for quiet. I walked to the center of the courtroom, my shoes barely whispering against the tile. I held the $5 bill between my fingers. My son once called me a body not yet buried, I said softly. He was wrong. I was buried long before this under his debt, his anger, his wife's poison words. But today, I dig myself out, not because I want revenge, but because I refuse to let my name rot in the ground they dug for me. Lauren shifted uncomfortably, but I didn't stop. I loved my son. I sold my home for him. I gave him everything. And when there was nothing left to take, he took my name. He turned me into paperwork. But you can't forge conscience, Your Honor. You can't sign away truth. I turned toward Jason. You were my heartbeat once. Now you're just the echo of it. Isabella stepped beside me, her voice low but steady. Your Honor, my client seeks not only reinstatement of her legal identity, but the full investigation of those who profited from her erasure. The judge looked down at the documents before him, then back at us. Mrs. Carter, he said, I've presided over hundreds of cases in my life, some about greed, some about betrayal, but this is evil dressed as family. He picked up his gavel. By the authority of the state of Ohio, I hereby declare that Edna Marie Carter is legally alive. The sound of the gavel cracked through the room. I felt something inside me lift a weight I didn't know had a name. The judge continued, voice sharper now. The court orders immediate suspension of all accounts linked to the defendants Jason and Lauren Carter, pending a full criminal investigation for insurance fraud, falsification of public records, and attempted homicide. Lauren gasped. Jason's head dropped into his hands. I didn't move. I simply folded the $5 bill and slipped it back into my pocket, where it belonged. Reporters rushed outside as the bailiff escorted them out. Isabella gathered her papers, her face calm but triumphant. It's over, she whispered. I shook my head. No, it's beginning. Outside the courthouse, flashes went off again, but this time I didn't flinch. The wind was crisp, the kind that burns your lungs but feels like truth. Isabella walked beside me, and when a journalist shouted, Mrs. Carter, what will you do now that you have your life back? I paused, turned to the cameras, and said, I didn't get my life back. I just proved it was mine all along. They vanished from the headlines within weeks, their silence louder than any apology. That night, I sat by the window in Isabella's house, watching the stars. For the first time, my name meant something again. Not because the law said so, but because I refused to let lies become my legacy. Months passed before I could even step inside that house again. Time didn't heal it, rebuilt. The first thing I smelled when I opened that old front door again wasn't dust or decay, it was freedom. The house looked smaller than I remembered, stripped of all its grandeur by time and guilt. The furniture was gone, the floors bare, the walls echoing with ghosts of laughter that weren't mine anymore. I walked through each room quietly, touching the empty door frames like you'd touch a wound that's finally healed over. This was the same place they'd thrown me out of, and now it was mine again, by law, by justice, and by endurance. I didn't move back in. I didn't want to sleep under that roof. I wanted to turn it into something new, something alive. Isabella asked what I planned to do with it, and I told her, I want people to feel warmth here again, but not the kind you buy with family money, the kind you earn after the cold. So we built the Second Cup, a cafe for the forgotten. The name came to me one night when I was sipping weak hospital coffee, thinking about how the second cup always feels different, not better, not worse, just earned. Within a month, contractors came to sand the floors, paint the walls, and scrub the scent of betrayal from every surface. I chose deep brown wood, soft yellow light, and windows that opened wide. The backyard where Lauren once grew roses, only for show, became a small garden of wildflowers again, untamed but beautiful. The staff arrived slowly, one by one, through whispers and community bulletins. Every woman who walked through that door carried her own kind of grief. There was Lorraine, the woman who had shared a half sandwich with me at a bus station on the night I first left home. She'd been abandoned by her children after her husband died. Now she stood behind the counter in a neat apron, head held high. There was Mabel, who'd spent 20 years caring for her husband only to be pushed aside when he remarried at 72. There was Ruth, who hadn't spoken to anyone in months until she poured her first cup here and said, "Smells like life again." We paid everyone fairly, not out of pity but out of principle. The cafe became a place where age wasn't a burden, it was a badge. Customers came in for the coffee, but they stayed for the stories. On the counter, in a small glass frame, sat the $5 bill, flattened, preserved, a relic and a lesson. Beneath it, a printed card read, "I started again with this. If you're sitting here today, you can too." People asked me about it often. I told them the truth. My son gave it to me the day he decided I wasn't worth keeping. But that $5 bought something bigger than his house, bigger than his shame. It bought my beginning. Sometimes I'd catch Lorraine polishing the frame gently, whispering to it like it was a prayer. "You showed them, didn't you, Edna?" she'd say, and I'd smile, not proudly, peacefully. "If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening." We hosted free coffee mornings every Friday for anyone over 60. No ID checks, no questions, just warmth. Some came with wheelchairs, some with old grief. They all left a little lighter. One woman, Irene, came in crying because her family had moved her out of her own home into a small room to make space. She told me, "They said I take up too much air." I handed her a cup of dark roast and said, "Take all you need, it's free here." By winter, the second cup had become something the local paper called a refuge brewed in resilience. I didn't care for the poetry of it, but I liked the truth underneath. People needed proof that we, the old, the dismissed, the invisible, still had something to build. One afternoon, Isabella came in wearing her sharp gray coat, the same one she wore in court. She looked around, smiling. "You did it, Edna." I shook my head. "We did. You gave me back my name. I just put it above a door." She laughed, and I poured her a coffee, strong and simple. Around us, the place buzzed with quiet conversation, the sound of spoons, low music, life. Before she left, Isabella looked up at the framed $5 bill and said softly, "You should know they froze every one of their accounts today. It's official." I didn't flinch, didn't smile. "Good," I said. "Now maybe they'll learn the value of $5 too." That night, after everyone left, I locked up alone. The chairs were stacked, the lights low, the smell of roasted beans hanging in the air. I stood behind the counter, tracing the glass over that bill. The woman reflected back at me was older, thinner, steadier. "The second cup," I whispered, reading the sign above the door. Second chances taste best when you've brewed them yourself. And for the first time in years, I let myself sit down and drink the last cup of the night slowly, quietly, savoring what it meant to be alive and unforgotten. The day the second cup opened, the sky was the color of cream in coffee, soft, calm, forgiving. The front steps were lined with marigolds, their bright petals trembling in the morning breeze. I stood at the doorway, not in celebration, but in quiet disbelief. The same door that had once shut in my face now stood open, wide and welcoming. Inside, the aroma of roasted beans drifted through the air, blending with the laughter of women who had once been forgotten by everyone but themselves. Lorraine bustled behind the counter, straightening napkins like a general preparing her troops. Her hair was pinned neatly, her name tag slightly crooked. Manager, it read, though I told her she didn't need one. The place was full before noon. Reporters came, cameras flashing. Regular people too, neighbors, curious strangers, faces I hadn't seen in years. They came to drink, but stayed to witness something they couldn't quite name. I watched from the back corner, unseen at first, sipping from a chipped mug that once belonged to my husband. Isabella stood beside me, dressed in that same gray coat, her expression equal parts pride and exhaustion. "You should go cut the ribbon," she said softly. I shook my head. "Not today. It's not my ribbon to cut." Lorraine stepped forward instead, holding the scissors with shaking hands. She looked over her shoulder at me for a heartbeat, and I nodded. The blades closed, the red ribbon fell, and applause broke out, not loud or raucous, just warm, honest. The kind that feels like sunlight. A reporter pushed through the crowd, microphone raised. "Mrs. Carter," she called, "a quick question. Do you forgive your son for what he did?" The room went silent. Even the espresso machine hissed and stopped. I set my cup down and stood slowly, feeling every eye turn toward me. I looked at the reporter, then past her, out the open door, where the autumn light touched the sign that read, "The second cup." "Forgiveness," I said quietly, "is for those who ask for it. My son hasn't asked, so, no, I don't forgive." She hesitated. "Then, do you seek revenge?" I smiled, not bitterly, just enough to steady the air. "No, I don't want revenge either. I only wanted to open a door for everyone who's ever had one slammed in their face." The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't need to. Some people simply nodded, understanding something deeper than words. Lorraine poured another round of coffee for a group of women near the window, her hands trembling just enough to make the cups clink. Isabella leaned close. "That was perfect." I shook my head again. That was honest. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. Later that afternoon, the crowd thinned. The cafe hummed softly with music and murmured conversations. I walked among the tables, listening to pieces of stories, the kind that don't make headlines. A widow finding her voice again. A woman laughing for the first time since her children stopped calling. Someone learning how to hope at 70. That was all I ever wanted. The framed $5 bill caught the light from the window. People stopped to look at it, sometimes snapping photos, sometimes just staring. Beneath the glass, the words gleamed. I started again with this. If you're sitting here, you can too. As evening settled, the last of the customers left, and Lorraine locked the front door. We sat together by the window with 2 cups of coffee, steam curling between us. "You ever think about what you'd say to him?" she asked quietly. "Jason?" She nodded. I thought for a long moment. I'd tell him I loved him once, that I still do, maybe, in the smallest, saddest way. But love doesn't mean letting someone bury you. I'd tell him that too. Lorraine reached across the table, touching my hand. "You're stronger than any of us, Edna." I smiled. "No, I just learned how to be alive twice." When she left, I stayed behind to close the lights. The street outside was empty now, the sign glowing faintly in the dark. I turned it off and was about to lock the door when I saw her. An older woman stood on the sidewalk, hesitating under the lamplight. Her coat was frayed, her shoes thin. She held something in her hand, a small, wrinkled bill. She caught my gaze and stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "I heard about this place on the news," she said. "I didn't know where else to go." I opened the door. The smell of coffee drifted out, warm against the cold night. She held up the bill between two trembling fingers. "It's all I have." I looked at it. A $5 note, creased and soft, just like mine once was. I smiled and stepped aside. "I once started again with exactly that," I said. "Your first cup's on the house. But your name, you'll have to keep that for yourself." She smiled back, eyes wet with something too old to be just sadness. She walked inside, and I turned the sign in the window from closed to open. And as she stepped inside, I realized the story had come full circle, not as revenge, but as recognition. Outside, the wind moved through the marigolds. Inside, another story began. And somewhere in the quiet between those two worlds, I realized sometimes resurrection isn't about coming back. It's about refusing to stay buried. You've been listening to my story, the story of how $5 and a broken heart turned into a second chance. Life doesn't always give you justice right away. Sometimes it waits until you're strong enough to stand up and claim it yourself. If my story touched you, if it made you believe that even the forgotten can rise again, don't let it end here. Hit subscribe to Grandma True Stories, where every voice, every wrinkle, and every hard-earned lesson finds a place to be heard. Because somewhere out there, another grandma is still waiting for her turn to speak, and with your help, she will. Thank you for listening. And remember, we may grow old, but we never grow silent.